Item number 12 is an addendum to the City of Yuba City General Plan, EIR, and 2021 through 2029 City of Yuba City City of Yuba City General Plan Housing Element. This will be presented by Mr. Ben Moody, who's our Development Services Director.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. So definitely a mouthful there. And so, but I am excited to bring this forward. Tonight I have our consultant, PlaceWorks, Jennifer Gaslam, here to help work through the presentation and help answer any of the specifics as we work through it. So, so what does this mean? What this means in a nutshell is that a housing element is a required element of your general plan. With your general plan, this needs to be updated every 8 years at minimum if you're staying on good terms with HCD. And so our region is on this 8-year cycle, which is coming due here very soon. And so a lot of agencies, you probably heard from Sutter County to Marysville in the SACOG region are working through this process. And so what this really does is it's an update. It looks at our inventory, our housing. Jennifer's going to walk you through it. And it really brings us into state law and accounts for these projections of what the housing needs are in our region. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jennifer, and then we can answer any questions at the end.
All right, good evening. Jennifer Gastelum with PlaceWorks. Thank you for this opportunity to come and present your updated housing element for adoption and then subsequently submission to the state. And I have a quick PowerPoint presentation to go over with you here of kind of the schedule that we took for the element, the components of it. It's a pretty meaty document. The regional housing needs allocation process, which is what drives the housing element update, and then some specific actions that you will need to undertake over the next 8-year period. Our initial review with the state, and then the CEQA document to accompany the housing element. So an overview of the housing element, it is a plan to accommodate the jurisdiction's fair share of housing needs over the next 8 years. It is unique in the fact that it is a 8-year document that gets reviewed by the state every 8 years, and it has to be certified for you to be in compliance with state law. So it addresses housing needs that are existing, as well as we project out the housing needs for the next 8 years. We kicked off this project probably, I think, pre-pandemic, so I wish if anyone remembers when that was. And we did have an initial Planning Commission study session back in April to kind of kick off and let everyone know that we're updating the housing element. We released the public review draft in June and then submitted, as I mentioned, for the 60-day review with the state. About 30 days in, we did a call with the state. We addressed some of their initial comments, and then we took the housing element to Planning Commission, who then authorized it to you. Once it is adopted, then we will submit. It's a 90-day certification. They have 90 days to review it, and then you are done for the next 8 years. The components of the housing element are broken into different categories. As I mentioned, we look at existing needs as well as we project out the needs. A new component of the housing element this round that's new to you as well as to me, who's been doing this a very long time, is the assessment of fair housing and identifying any sort of barriers or issues with fair housing. So this is a kind of a sticky wicket of an issue, and we tried to analyze all the information and kind of provide a history of how development was occurred over the time since incorporation. And then the approach to the RHNA, which is, I'll get a little bit more into that, but basically the state comes up with a regional housing needs allocation number. And basically this is a growth projection. It is not a mandatory development requirement. It is to identify that the city has enough land to develop should the market produce housing. And then of course we look at potential constraints to housing in terms of costs and fees and timing for how long it takes to get a building permit. And then we do a checks and balances process where we look at the previous 8-year housing element and identify what programs were completed and what programs should be continued forward. And then that feeds into the goals, policies, and implementation programs that staff will then report on to the state every year. Your annual housing element progress report will report on some of these actions that I'm going to get into here. So as I mentioned, what drives this process is the state comes up with a growth number, and then that number is then assigned to councils of governments. In the case of Yuba City, your assigned allocation is 3,308 new units. That's, again, we're identifying that there's land available to accommodate those units at varying densities. As for perspective, SACOG's RENA number was 153,000. The interesting part about this is that there were, I did write your previous housing element, so I'm familiar with some of the development and some of the development that hasn't occurred. And so subsequently, 16 years ago or so, there was some pretty ambitious plans pre-recession. Nothing I need to tell probably you all here, but there were annexations that were planned and there was development that was supposed to occur that definitely slowed down. So your previous allocation had planned for rezoning of land, and that didn't occur in the last planning period. So because that didn't occur, the state kind of feels that you're kicking the can down the road and not identifying land available. And therefore, we added the previous round 529 units. So you have an allocation, again, to show that you have enough land for 3,837 units. We do not like to just take a rezone approach to these things. We look at every nook and cranny of your city and identify where there is vacant land or non-vacant land, a site that might have something on it but has potential for future growth. We also looked at all the development potential of your many specific plans. And then a new category this round is projecting out accessory dwelling units, ADUs. Those are second units, granny flats, all of those terms. So we can also count those. So we use those first three approaches before we identify any sort of rezone process. There is a program in the housing element, and I'll get into that, where there is not enough land zoned at 20 units an acre. And so there is a program, and the city has 3 years to identify additional sites to rezone to 20 units an acre to accommodate your potential growth moving forward. Oh, this is a really convoluted table. So it is in more excessive detail in the document, but basically it shows you what your RENA was, and it's broken out into different income categories. And the lower income category basically this is a land use exercise. In the lower income category, we're looking at land that is 20 units an acre. And then the moderate income category is medium density, possibly duplexes or small, condos or attached houses or anything that's a, patio type smaller unit. And then above moderate is basically all your single family. So as I mentioned, we have that 529 unit carryover. So then that increased the RENA. So as I mentioned, we take up what's off the top. We look at what your approved projects are. So we know that there is some development occurring, specifically in the above moderate. And then there's also a project that is an affordable project. So we take those units, the 176 off the top. Then we can project out, as I mentioned, ADUs. Now, every ADU that you do build, you will get credit for it moving forward when you report to HCD annually. So right now, we're just projecting 40 based on approvals of staff or of people coming in that want to actually do ADUs. And then we look at all the vacant land and underutilized, then the specific plans, then what is going to be coming online. And this is kind of the whole overview of what is planned for the next 8 years. So where you see that there is a surplus of 1,122 potential accommodate units in the above moderate category, where we are short is the 208 units in the lower, and that's what equates to the the rezone program that the city will need to do within the next 3 years is to identify additional potentially, now it's 10 acres at 20 units an acre. If you want to go higher, it's less acreage. If you want to allow higher density, which again, your general plan allows up to 30, we took a very conservative approach to say 20 because that is kind of fits better. But you can go to 30 and that will be less acreage. That was a lot, really sorry. A couple of other things, housing element action items. So as I mentioned, so one of the other things is to set you up so that you have enough flexibility that you can approve projects as they come forward. And it's kind of a balancing act. So as you want to approve good projects that might not necessarily meet densities or things, to give you the most flexibility, one of the things that we are doing is there's a program that you will subsequently approve future down the road. There'll be a number of zoning code amendments. One of them will be to remove the permit process for the C1 and the CO and allow residential projects and commercial. It doesn't require you to do residential projects in the commercial. It allows for more development to occur because there was a track record of doing this, so we were able to sell to HCD that there's more land available, and therefore that's why your rezone number is less. So this is, again, kind of a negotiation that we went through, plus the rezone redesignation of the 10 acres to at least 20 units an acre. Then in the last 8 years, there's been a number of legislation that's been passed on amendments to allowing for additional accessory units, the second units, as I mentioned, and more provisions for density bonuses for affordable housing developers and just to create more density if possible. Another action item will be to develop some objective design standards. So while it does sound scary to allow things permitted by right, where you can put your teeth into something is through your objective design standards to make sure that they meet what your intent is for how things should fit in your community. And then there's a number of, as I mentioned previously, the affirmatively furthering fair housing, making sure that there are fair housing practices, and then a number of zoning code amendments that will need to be updated just to come into compliance with state law. There was a discussion about SACOG and priority policies to do several of these 6 items here. They are in line with the programs and policies in the Yuba City housing element, as well as what SACOG's doing. So there's definitely alignment there with what is happening in terms of facilitating potentially missing middle housing and strategies for higher density, but making development look right, and then reduced displacement. The last one on there is part of the fair housing legislation that's come out. As I mentioned, we did one review already with the state where they had us make mostly minor clarification edits. The state, as you know, always has to have the final word. So they definitely had us make some edits to meet some of these new laws that they are trying to implement. But the document was posted on the website. We have worked with advocates and made sure that everyone is made available the document and address any questions that we had. To accompany the housing element tonight, we did an addendum to the EIR. Our staff are also in the process of doing some minor technical updates to your general plan. So there will be a general plan update coming forward with the rezones with an actual EIR. So doing an addendum to your existing EIR is the safest process, most ironclad to get you through this housing element update as we move forward through the rest of the general plan and the full EIR document. And that is all I have. So I'm here for your questions. Thank you. Sorry for talking so long.
I have a quick question for you. If you go back to the SACOG policy slide.
Yes. Oh, sorry. I there you go. Right there.
Can you help me better understand what number 3 means?
So discretionary versus by right development. So the state feels that if you are allowing development to occur by right, so again, this is where we talked about your objective design standards. So if you have, here's a listing of everything you have to do for your development, and a developer comes in and meets all those lists, then they are approved ministerially without having to go through a hearing process. So that's what by right development is, and that's what the state feels will help to incentivize development across the whole SACOG region.
We won't have to sit in front of a planning commission and have their project redesigned.
Correct.
Perfect, thank you. Other questions? Yes?
Through the mayor.
Yeah.
Really, really well done housing element document. I appreciate the intense work of going out and reaching and talking with people who serve in various capacities of housing. So there's a lot of data in here. But I was curious to know how, because early on, I think in 2019, it seems so far ago, but it feels
Lifetime
like
ago.
right? Where are we at with the opportunity areas? Because I mean, that was supposed to help kind of stimulate some design or development and credits and all that. It's listed in the housing element as a potential for certain sections of our community to help develop potentially low cost or affordable housing. I'm just kind of curious where we're at with that.
So Councilwoman, I'm not sure if I totally follow the question. Definitely over time, the city has had a redevelopment area defined, where we had a lower impact fee. And then there's been some state opportunity zones that had to do with businesses and tax bases. Really for housing, what this is it really just does a in-depth analysis and look at your inventory. And then it gives you a program. Then it wants you to set up programs to help whatever you can do as the city to help incentivize housing. And so that is anything and everything that can be from reducing impact fees to looking at different opportunities to support housing that the council's been working on. So I'm not sure I follow it on the opportunity zones.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's part of, it's to help with some of the opportunity zones or opportunity areas where to somehow assist in further developing some of the low numbers of, lower income housing availability. So it was mentioned in the report, and I just wanted to.
Maybe it was the Green Means Go. I know we're coming back to you with some of
No, that's a different with SACOG. So this is actually to help bring investors to buy certain parts of community and then to be able to build kind of how regional housing does it, but in a much more different and complex way, from what I understand. So I maybe we can talk offline, but
I'd definitely be happy to look into it. I will tell you, though, just my standpoint with this is that I'm hoping to be around in 8 years when this comes due again. And I wanted to really look at this with a realistic approach, because you could play a lot of numbers, play numbers with your densities, play numbers, but really it's looking at what is realistic, what is our current city limits, what's going to happen over the next 8 years that's realistic that I could be accountable for at the end of that. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Anybody else? All right. Back to the council for action. Oh, anybody from the public like to speak? Thank you.
So to be clear, Mayor, you are opening the public hearing, is that correct?
I don't have that on my agenda now.
But if you would be so kind as to open the public hearing, we'll make sure we got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
My agenda has public comment first.
The public comment can take place during public hearing.
Okay. No, I understand. There's certain verbiage that needs to be said, and I don't have it.
Could perhaps just saying, I now open this matter up for public hearing.
Perfect. I now open this matter up for public hearing.
Hi, yes, so I'm Heather Esselman. I live in Yuba City on Lincoln Road, and I noticed in the presentation that there was a big fat 0 in the middle column on Newcomb Ranch and Sanborn. So it sounds like somebody had an opportunity to see that we had some, you can look, do you see where it says, not that one. It was the actual, more moderate. So you can see that in the Bogue Stewart Master Plan and Newcomb Ranch, in the middle, there's a big fat 0. So there was an opportunity recently, I don't know if it's been already approved or not, but for us to have put something or request something for that situation to have those numbers up, because you can clearly see that the numbers that we have on the very right, which are for the individual units, is quite high, whereas the numbers on the lower at the very bottom where the shortfalls are very low. So I think that the council, as well as maybe communicating from the council to the planning commission and anybody that's working, trying to get this zoning done in a manner that will encourage those numbers on the left-hand side to increase in proportions that are somewhat similar to those on the right-hand side. Because we don't have people, it's not like the community has the percentages on the right more than the percentages on the left. There are definitely people on the lower income spectrum that could really use someplace to live, and obviously we're missing some available units for them. So I just wanted to kind of focus on that because that's the latest thing that was discussed recently, correct? Yes. So thank you.
So I'm happy to respond on that one. You know, this is a perfect example of us taking a realistic approach. And so this is a count of what is going to be in the city limits. And so we projected phase 1. We didn't take the whole plan. And that's part of the problem with the carryover from the past, is because they took a larger area of the Lincoln East specific plan that never came to be. And so with this one, I said, hey, let's take phase 1. Phase 1 is single family homes and a multifamily component. And so this is So your lower, as Jenny spoke, is really relates to your R3, your moderates, your R2, your duplexes, your granny flats, your middle, and then you have your single family homes. So Newcomb Ranch, you know, Bogue Stewart Master Plan, this is a specific plan. It's been in the works for 5 years. We're not going to rezone it last minute. And so it's realistically what we've got planned in there is a multifamily component and a low single family. I could have made some numbers up, you know, say, hey, 10% of the single family will have an ADU, but we didn't count for that. We're trying to be somewhat realistic, what I think is going to build out in the city, and that's where we're at. And so I projected 0. If we come in with 10, hey, great. But right now, at really where we're at, and what matters with this is that we have a surplus and moderate right now is how we're zoned in the city. And then as more area annexes in, you know, it's really, again, the big push is to take some of what the state is finally figuring out, in my eyes, is they're trying to take some of that power out of the bureaucrats, and depending on what a development comes in with, they want to be ready to go over the counter and go. And so that's really where it's at with this by right. It's really over the counter. What do you want to do?
Other public comment? Online?
No public comment.
Okay. I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the council.
Through the mayor.
Yes.
I move to adopt a resolution of the City Council of the City of Yuba City adopting the 2021 through 2029 City of Yuba City General Plan Housing Element Associated Addendum to the General Plan EIR.
Second.
I have a motion by Vice Mayor Shaw, second by Councilperson Espandola. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, item 12 passes unanimously. Thank you for all your work over the years. And Ben, thank you as well.